Shudayu. So my name is Aryaloka, for those of you I haven't met before, and this is an evening celebrating this community, this residential women's community that existed over several years in several manifestations of place and form, we'll say, people. And I got the short stick, maybe, to be the MC. So I'll be like keeping track of time and just sort of moving us through the program. And we have folks online, and we have a slideshow. And one of our community members is online, and I'll invite Shudayu to spotlight her for us. And that is Varda.
Not like screen share.
Doesn't look like and you have to share the screen yet.
Yeah. Hi, Varda.
Hi.
And then could you also spotlight us here too at the same time for the people on Zoom? Great. So we're going to kind of move between this and the slideshow, and hopefully it'll go fairly smoothly. So forgive us if it doesn't. And we need to start with introductions. So some of you may not have met everyone here. Maybe you have. So again, my name is Aryaloka, and I came to Aryaloka in 1994 and became a mitra in 1995. And I joined this women's community, this configuration of this women's community, with one or two others who are not here in that period of time in 1995, and lived in community through 2002, so for about 7 years. And I currently live in Medford and practice acupuncture and participate in Sangha as much as I can. Yeah. So we'll just go down the line and introduce ourselves. Yeah.
So I'm Joanne, and I started coming around to Aryaloka early 90s, maybe 91, and I don't know if I beat the record. I think I've been a mitra now 4 times. I'm not sure how many ceremonies I've had, but I've had a lot of ceremonies. Recommitting. And I joined the community in 1993 or 4. We'll clarify the time when it's on screen. And I currently live in Dover, New Hampshire. I'm a psychotherapist, and I've just recently kind of found my way back to Aryaloka, though I've been practicing on my own for the time that I kind of left the Aryaloka community. So.
Okay, I'm Aryaloka, which means song of energy in the pursuit of the good. Before I go too much further, for those of you who don't know me, I have Parkinson's, and I may either slow down or I may speed up and have a lot of movement. So it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong, it's fine, but you have to bear with me. I have the pleasure of coming to Aryaloka about 1986. And I presently live in an assisted living in Durham, New Hampshire. And I'll talk a little bit more later.
My name is Vidyavati. I'm from New Zealand, but in 1990 I came here to live for about 7 or 8 years. And I was particularly drawn to the women here, the vitality and energy and creativity of American women that I just loved. And I lived in communities for the whole time I was here, and you'll hear a bit about that tonight. I haven't lived here for the last 28 years, but I've connected up with my friends here just recently.
Hi, I'm Singatara. I came here, I believe it was 93. Corinna will probably know, she's so good with dates. But I believe it was 93 because I remember Karuna Devi being ordained, so that was my first experience with that. And I live across the river, so my property, I bought my property the same time Aryaloka was bought, 1985. And I say that's because the Buddha said this one needs to be right next door. And so And so I always wanted to live in community, and I was only in community for probably a little over a year. But we'll talk more about that.
And then we'll go on screen to Varda.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Quite well.
Oh, good, because I'm not good at projecting my voice. So my name's Varda. I grew up near Boston. Started coming to Aryaloka in the mid 80s, just a little while after Virigita. I was there until sometime in the late 80s or early 90s. I don't remember dates very well, but I went to Cambridge, England, for about a year and a half, worked in the evolution shop, and then I came out to Montana in the mid 90s, which is where I am now. We created a couple of right livelihood businesses and a women's community that ran for about 10 years or so. And so now I'm happily living on a little ranchette in Montana with my husband, Buddhapalada, and 3 dogs, 2 horses, 6 chickens.
That's great. So here's our panel, as it were. And so we're going to show a few pictures. Mati is going to switch over to the slideshow. And we met 3 or 4 times for several hours to plan this presentation, and even just trying to remember, what house was that? Who was living there then? So we, yeah, so Vidivati might say a few things about something here. Yeah.
So these first 3 slides just give you an overview of the communities the women's communities that were here over the decade in the 90s. And that's a timeline of the main ones, and these were some of the houses we lived in. As you can see, there were a lot of different houses that we moved around in, mainly because there was winter rentals that we could rent very cheaply by the ocean for 9 months of the year, and then we had to move out for 3 months, and then we'd move back in again. So that was the timeline. And I'll leave this slide up for a little while, perhaps even while you're speaking, Leela. And these were the combinations of people in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of those communities, and then I've got 3 more to show you. So just to give you an idea, people changed as we moved from one house to another. So back to you, Leela.
Great question from Amala there. Can you make the slideshow presentation mode?
Full screen. I was wondering about that.
You can spotlight it.
How do I do that from here?
The answer might.
Layout.
I'm sure the answer is yes, but we didn't practice that, so.
Oh, is that Sean?
Yes.
Look at his hair. Oh.
So we'll hear more about Sean in just a few minutes.
Oh.
There we go.
Well done.
There you go. And actually, if you could go a few more slides, we'll go to the couch.
Yes.
Okay, you ready for that?
Yeah. So,
So these were 3 smaller communities in Newmarket. Okay.
and then one more, yeah. So we thought it was best to start at the beginning. And so this is the beginning. So Varda and Virigita pioneered this 10-year residential community. And so I'm going to invite them to speak a little bit more about what led them to make that decision, what was it like, and anything that they want to share. Virigita's going to start us off, yeah?
Well, I was already a Buddhist when I first encountered Triratna. I had been traveling to Vermont in the Tibetan tradition. And when I discovered Aryaloka in 1986, I started classes and retreats because it was geographically closer. And then the emphasis really on spiritual friendship and also Sangharakshita is really clear articulation of the Dharma. I ended up, I became a mitra and I requested ordination in 1988. And I longed, however, for a living situation that was comprised of individuals who shared my ideals, were actively practicing, and so living a life that was really infused with meaning and ethical accountability. Talk about ethics a little bit. And when I heard from Varda that who's been separating, her living situation, her husband, that she wanted to move into a community, I was really thrilled. And my initial response really was wanting to help provide support and also to really deepen my friendship with her. And she and I had both requested ordination, and we had also met Aryaloka here when she was visiting in 1989 and deciding that she was going to come to the States. And both of us had the idea in mind that we really wanted to also live with gravity. And so we ended up finding a rental. This one was not a winter rental, but it had a pool, which my son has done. Okay. It was his job to clean the pool, and he's never wanted a pool since. Now our model for community was from England, the single-sex communities that were established in the UK, but I had a young son. And I will be forever grateful, really, for all of my roommates here in various combinations, who really supported Sean being in the community. And he has benefited tremendously. He really knows women very well. Marriage is and he said to me one time, he said, "Gee, you're a person. I really got to know you as a person when you." Oh. And I thought, oh, that's nice. We decided to move in. Baharda, it was Linda then, and with Sean. And we wanted to really move forward and really looking at the principle of how do you have a committed Buddhist life? How do you intensify that desire, and how do you manifest in your life? And we were really more supportive of that, but we didn't really adhere rigidly to the structure of the single-sex communities. But having said that, I do want to recognize that I found a great value in single-sex activities, especially for women my generation. It's the older one, right? The younger. And we could essentially help each other to rid of the unhelpful conditions that our parents and our society had created for us. And we could help each other speak up, assert ourselves, become leaders based on Buddhist principles. And personally, I have found myself developing aspects of myself and acting and communicating from a more authentic place, courageous and maybe sometimes outrageous.
I agree with that.
And I just just want to, something to the effect of, I had written this little poem, I'll just read you one stanza from it. This kind of captures it. It was advice I was giving to my granddaughter. And it says, that young tough guy on the motorcycle is your own desire for speed and danger. That starving artist whose paintings you so admire, but an intimation of your own unborn creation. And she's definitely a force to be reckoned with. So, yeah, I'm gonna say too much more, but just that along with my son and Barbara, we moved into the first Tree Rotten women's community in the United States, awaiting the Japanese arrival in 1890. Story goes.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll invite Varda to pick up from her perspective. What was it like for you, those early decisions, those early days?
Well, I was in a very different situation. I'm, I think about 10 years younger than Viragita. And I had gotten married when I was 19 years old and had lived very little time outside of a family or a married relationship. But when I came to Aryaloka, I was very attracted to these ideals of living in community, and particularly the women's activities, the single sex activities really attracted me. And at the time, I have a very poor memory, so I don't remember how this started, but at some point we started a women's group, a women's meeting where we would meet on Sunday afternoons, and it was a really, really vibrant women's group, and it included Viragita. And I started to get some perspective on my life and realized that I was in a very unhealthy marriage and needed to leave it. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to do that. But when we started to talk, Viragita and I, about living together, I could see a way out of it. And so we formed a little community. That was a great house. I had an absolutely enormous bedroom. like we could all live in there together. And it was a very rich, it kind of gave me a soft landing. And it was a very rich context for practice. So it was kind of the combination of having a mirror on my own life and the support to make the changes that I wanted to make, both emotional and material. And then the vibrant women's only situation. It was just a really good context for me, and support and also inspiration allowed me to really reimagine my life. And it was in that context that I also asked for ordination. I was going to say something else, but it flew right out of my head. Yeah, and I don't have any children, didn't at the time. And I wasn't sure how it was going to work out to have a young, I think he was a preteen at the time. But I really, really liked Viragita, and her steadiness, emotional strength really helped me a lot. As you can imagine, I was a bit of a mess. And it was just a really excellent situation for me to stabilize and launch from there.
Oh, thank you, Varda. Yeah, so I'm just very moved listening to both of you. Yeah, so we chose 4 questions in our meetings. We kind of did a lot of just connecting, really. And it was such a delight to meet together and plan this. At one point, Varda said, well, why don't we just keep on meeting? So we may do that. And I was wondering if you could just go back to the picture too of the two of them.
Don't know if I can go back.
Oh, that's okay, then we'll stay here. So we are, we chose 4 questions, and then we found quotes from Sangharakshita to sort of draw out some of the principles of spiritual community. And so our presentation will be framed around those 4 questions. And Joe will read the first one.
So our first question was, or is, why did we choose to live in a spiritual community? And Varda and Brigitte have already touched on that some. And Sangharakshita, in his wisdom, let us know that residential spiritual communities are as varied as the individuals who live in them. However, experience has shown that single-sex communities are the most effective and supportive context for spiritual practice. How each project goes about this work is up to the individuals concerned.
And we'll just go through a few more pictures here. Here's Sangharakshita visiting.
This was Bente giving us a name for our community, Tara Vyuha, and blessing it really, and he hung up the sign you can see on the wall. And this was Aryaloka and Varda and Brigitte and myself. And this was us doing our own blessing, taking sage, burning sage around the grounds with Tashi the dog. This was a later community, another combination, and there's Sean, the son.
Who's on the far left?
That's Lene.
Oh, I remember her.
Okay, I think that's one more.
This is us later on at Autumn Hayes Farm. This is where I joined the community in '96 or so.
Where was that?
Right at Singatara's house,
Oh.
across the river.
Okay.
Yep. And one more, this is the 5 of us again. So young. So yeah, so we'll switch back to the spotlight and then we'll have just a bit of sharing on that question that why did we choose, yeah.
So interesting, when I was reflecting on this, I was actually at the time, right before I moved into the women's community, I was actually living with 2 other Buddhists. I was living with my partner at the time, who was a Mitra, and with another order member, male order member. And I just realized, we didn't consider ourselves a community then. So even though we were Buddhists living together, it wasn't, I don't remember us considering it a community. It was more like house sharing. And so it brought to light how, there's something quite intentional about the women's community, or any, intentional community rather than just house sharing. So at the time I had my partner, and he was moving into the men's community for the second time, I think. And at the time I was a Mitra, my practice was just around Aryaloka, like many of ours here, going to Mitra study a lot and going to Tuesdays. And I really wanted to take advantage of the structure that the FBO had at the time to kind of deepen my practice. And that the next natural step was to join the women's community. And at the time I was feeling quite close to Virya Gita already. She was a good friend. I just felt a natural, easy connection with her. I loved her energy. She was a little wild, just passionate. And, I love that passionate energy about her. It was very inspiring. And she and Varda, Linda then, and Dialochna were really the most, or in my small group, the more experienced women of our Sangha. So it felt quite delicious and inspiring to be able to actually live together. and to deepen my practice in that way. They were beautiful to me in their practice. I just found them so beautiful at that time. I remember that. So that was quite tender actually. I'll save that bit for later. And so I was kind of like moving from the familiar, living, with my partner. I kind of knew how to do that, not very well, but I was doing it. And to the unfamiliar, into this, deepening into the spiritual unknown really. And seeing in other friendships that Dakini energy, and I just wanted that. It was like when you're moving towards something that you find beautiful. And I really could see that, those structures that had been set up, they work. Already worked the Mitra study Tuesday night, like all those things going on retreat, I could sense that they work. And so I had faith and trust that this next step of living in community would also work. So it's like the Shraddha, having faith, placing my heart on that. So that's how I kind of chose to live in community.
So we did a little pre-planning, and Sinatara was going to say a little bit too. Yeah.
Let's see. At that time, I was working in Concord as a public guardian. I'm retired now, about a year and a half, and I love being retired. But financially, I was struggling with the mortgage. I needed to refinance because it was too expensive. The mortgage was really expensive for my home. So in the meantime, I was attending Mitra classes and things here, and I became friends with Leela, Gita, and Vijayavati was the first order member woman I met, and I was so attracted to her gentleness, her spirituality, and I really felt at ease with these women, and I trusted them, and I don't know how it came about, but somehow the stars were all aligned because they needed another place to live. And I think it was because they were in a dome over here and it was too noisy and they didn't like it, and I think there were a lot of reasons. Bugs. I was gonna say that, but I said no.
No, you could say it. There's a lot of bugs.
And rodents, I think.
Rodents, yeah.
So anyhow, I was so happy that they moved in, and I remember taking pictures down off the walls and things like that, so it would feel like everyone's home and not just my home. I always wanted to live, as I told you, with other women in a spiritual type of community, and yeah, so it was just a wonderful experience for me, and I'm so grateful that I did that. And I'm still friends almost 40 years later with 30 years
Let's
later.
not put us that old.
Aryaloka and Gita and Vijayavati and Aryaloka came into that fold, and they just couldn't get rid of me. So.
And so I'll say a little bit too about my own personal experience, because I also lived in the domes down the road. And when I came into Aryaloka, I was 26, and I met Joanne, I think, first, and then Vijayavati and Gita shortly thereafter. And I was very drawn to what they were creating. Like, I could see the depth of their practice. It was very palpable, we'll say, and very mythic. And I was a lost soul, of those of you who knew me then, and I just didn't feel part of humanity somehow. And I was connecting with people who were embracing and embodying ethical practice, meaningful conversation, and it was a very obvious step for me, I think, because I was so unstable at the time, and they were offering the stability, even though we moved like every 6 months. But the friendships, the bonds that were created living in community are like none other than I have experienced in my life, either in family or in romantic partnership. Run very, very deep. So there's a few more minutes if Vidyavati or Varda want to say anything here in relation to this first question, why? Oh no, Varda already spoke.
Yeah. Did you
Would you like to say anything?
I just felt really fortunate that Varna and Viragita wanted to live in community, and they were so enthusiastic and committed to it. And I was really happy to live with Sean. He was great, you know, just a creative kid. And he held his own in the community, you know. He wasn't going to have these women tell him what to do. He was a great kid. I had lived in women's communities in New Zealand and in England, and so I had some experience of it. And some of the women here had seen the men living in community here at Aryaloka, so they had a sense of it, but how was that going to look for women? And I just loved it. I saw the potential of women here, the creativity, the joy we had in community. We're going to talk about that a bit later, but some of the, you know, most pleasurable periods of my life living with other women.
Lovely. So, so that'll bring us into the next question, and we'll hear the quote and the question. And Vidyavati, if you would share your slideshow again, sorry. And Singatara, do you have a copy of the questions?
That would be me, I'm supposed to be giving this to you.
Follow the rules.
Thank you.
Yep. So as soon as that comes up, Singatara will launch us into the next question.
These are words of Sangharashita. And this, what was it like to live in a spiritual community? The spiritual community consists of individuals who are in deep personal contact with one another. It will challenge you to be yourself and demand that you take further steps towards being a true individual. People within the spiritual community will do what they can to spark off real communication, genuine spiritual exchanges.
Great, and then we'll slide through a few photos again. Put your pictures. Yep. If that's okay. Keep our format. I think there's 7 pictures here. Here we are. This is Holly, who lived with us for about a year.
This was one of our communities. I think it was the one in the domes, wasn't it, with Bante Singarach?
Yeah, they've got Singatars up there.
This was some of this group are our spiritual community. We made a trip together down to a conference that Bante was speaking about in Arizona, and there were other members of the Sangha from here down there. But we made a special trip, and afterwards we went on a camping trip. You'll see some shots of that.
And this was in the 90s, right?
Oh, yeah, 94. This was Bante at the conference, looking relaxed, and this was us on the camping trip. We stayed in a teepee right on the edge of the Grand Canyon.
It was freezing cold.
So cold.
And on the right is a photo of Viragita is a very good horsewoman, and she was trying to encourage Joanne to come on a horse track with her on this trip, and Joanne wasn't too sure.
Terrified.
Anyway, here they are.
She got me on the
Right.
And animals were very much part of our community. They would say something.
Yes, the taller horse is Tucker. I had him 37 years. The other horse, Tally, her mane is in the stupa in the first level. And when she died of old age, we gave her a Buddhist funeral. It was quite lovely. And the picture on the right was Viragita let me dress her up.
Look at you.
That's my dog Ben. He used to come over here, and because I came here, and he followed me through the woods. I used to cross over from the river And he would go upstairs and ask the men to come out and play with him. And the men's community was over here, and so they would come out and play with him. And the women in my community, in our community, really loved Ben too, especially Aryaloka. He was a great dog.
Next, Tucker.
Yeah, that's Tucker again. I had him longer than any relationship.
Cross-country ski.
Oh, yes. No, Barbara too. And we followed her.
We had a lot of fun as a
Yeah.
community. We'd go
Yeah.
out skiing together for the day.
I should say too, when we went out to Arizona, we had to come back to be like on time for a retreat. Was Bante leading the retreat? I can't remember. It was like a big retreat though, or some, and we missed the flight home. It was someone's fault.
Got the time wrong.
But we did make it.
Great. So then we'll sing a Tara to lead off some reflections on what was it like to live in a spiritual community.
It was very spiritual. It was very focused on what we were doing together, and we would meditate sometimes together, which was really nice. And we did, and she and I shared the same loft area, and so because she was an order member, I wasn't. I made sure I was on that cushion, really, you know. Every time she was looking, I was on that cushion. No. I'd be like 7 a.m. sitting on the cushion. But so what happened was Gita and Vijayavati helped me to deepen my going for refuge, and that was the point for being together. And we had community night where we would get together, and Bhante came to our home, and we had dinner with him, and we had Subhuti at our home, and Sangadevi. Other women would come and stay with us. I don't know if they stayed with us. I think maybe, I don't know. But I remember them meditating with us and blessing, doing blessings in the shrine room. So it was a very moving experience. And I have a journal, and every now and then I look through it.
And then, thank you. Yeah, and then Gita, I think you were gonna share. You feeling all right with that?
It just,
What was it like?
well, it was delightful, really. I think mostly very delightful. There were a few challenges, but I think our camping trip was a big highlight. And one night, I had to get up and go use the bathrooms. I went out to the what do they call them, houses, but, and I was coming back, and
Let's just say it was in the middle of the night, okay?
Okay, that's true. And she thought I was
An intruder.
and she almost threw a flash.
Sorry.
But, yeah. Yeah, and I didn't mind the change either, changing places. There's an aspect that was really kind of mythic about that. And I think we also created rituals, and there were ones that had, meaning for us. And Bhante's initial visit was incredible, because we all wrote a poem for him, and we read them to him, and Sean illustrated Life is King, because he really liked that poem. And so we read them, and I remember after reading mine, he goes, evocative.
And then Varda, I think, is gonna share a few reflections here too.
Yeah, I found it, Gita was really easy to live with, and very supportive, flexible, more mature than I was. You know, looking back, that was the first spiritually based friendship that I had experienced. And she was a really gentle leader and a very kind friend who gave me lots of leeway, which I appreciated. I really loved that we included Sean in our community evenings. We decided from the get-go we weren't going to sort of separate him, isolate him. And so we used to play this game. I don't remember the name of that game. Gita, do you remember that game we played?
You mean Scruples?
Scruples, right. It's a bunch of cards with questions, you know, like, and the question is usually sort of ethically based, you know. I can't think of an example, but he was very wise. He was quite an unusual, not your typical teenager. He was very wise, and he was very kind and considerate. And you know, I had some misgivings beforehand because I just wasn't sure. I didn't have any kids and didn't know what a young teenage boy was going to be like to live with, but it was just never any problem. We had a lot of fun together. And the other memory I have that's really strong in my mind is you know, we would, well, two things, you know, when Virgita was a nurse, and so she would come home, and at dinner we would talk about her day, and she didn't realize that I have a bit of a squeamish stomach, and so she would tell me some of the graphic things that she was involved with during the day, and I finally had to say, could we please not talk about nursing things at dinner? Which she very very graciously complied with. And the other thing we used to do is we'd kind of get started on a conversation downstairs, and then we'd say, oh, well, it's time to go to bed. And so we'd go upstairs and we would just carry on the conversation in the hallway, because we couldn't stop because it was such a deep and interesting conversation. We would just sort of stand in the hallway and go on and on and on, and find it difficult to leave off and go to bed. And that's a very fond memory that I have.
It's interesting that you share that, Varda, because what I've heard in the Triratna discourse is that communities actually got their start when people were leaving retreats. They didn't want to go home.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how people started living together. That's my memory, anyways, yeah. Like a nod from Nagavati, so. Yeah. So we have a few more minutes. I'll just share. I think I was always surprised. Like there was always something every day that surprised me, and I think it broke me out of how things are supposed to be and how people are supposed to be. And one of the highlights was learning that popcorn and M&Ms go really well together. I know, and Virgita was the one who introduced that to us on our movie nights, and I was like, ooh, and then I was like, oh. But yeah, just that it really, well, I'm going to say a bit more under the next question that we'll come to in a second, so why don't I wait for that? Yeah, any other comments from them?
I think, we always had a meditation room, shrine room in our community. And we were all there every morning on those cushions. That's my memory.
Yeah.
It was quite a commitment, and whether you got up out of shame that or whether you really wanted to be there, we did it, and it built a bond. And we had a community evening once a week, and they were fantastic. You just never knew where they would take us, but they really deepened our bond together.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that too, because now I'm remembering one of the shrine rooms we had in a house in Exeter. We painted this beautiful turquoise blue-green floor. So it's like you're stepping into this pool.
Yeah.
And And Viragita and I remember being in there with you in particular, everyone, but Viragita and I would recite the Ratnaguna Samchaya Gatha Sutra and put it to memory for some time. Yeah. But call forth as much as you can of love and faith. And what is it? Respect. Yeah. Those beautiful words that are, again, that bond runs really deep when you're practicing in that way so intensively together.
There was also just a lot of affection and kindness that, you know, you kind of know from your family of origin, hopefully. And then all of a sudden you have this, you know, with other women. It was just lovely. I was heartbroken, you know, I was inspired to move into the women's community, but I also came in heartbroken because I was, you know, separating from my boyfriend and all the drama of that. My room, as opposed to Farah's room that was large, mine was like a little tiny closet. Maybe it was a closet and I barely fit in my food. It didn't even I couldn't even put my futon out right. I had to squish it. And so I remember the first night I'm laying there going, oh my God, what have I done kind of thing. And then Vidyavati came in and she just sat on the futon with me and was just so tender and kind and, you know, loving really. And that was my first night. You know, it was so crying. You know, I was probably weeping, God knows, but and you were just so nice to me. I remember that. It's my first night.
Ooh, okay, so we're about 2 more questions. And so Vidyavati will share her screen again, and we'll look at a few more pictures. And I'll say one of my humorous moments was when Vidyavati asked once, where is the linen closet? And I was like, what?
What is that?
Yes. Okay, so this will be my turn now, so I'll read out the question and the quote. I'll let you. How did living in spiritual community help our spiritual practice? And this is words from Sangharakshita. The community is a situation in which spiritually like-minded people can live together in a way that is expressive of their Buddhist values and can intensify their friendships and deepen their experience of the Dharma, especially their experience of going for refuge. It's not easy to live the spiritual life. It's not easy to develop as an individual. It's not easy to be a true Buddhist. We need the help and cooperation of others who are trying to do the same thing. So we'll look at a few more pictures here before I say more. I think there's just 2 in this set. So this is a retreat, I think. Subhuti had come to visit and led a retreat. I think this might have been the retreat I asked for ordination on the 3 Lakshanas. And there's a familiar face, 2nd row. Where is she? Nandali.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
On the second in the glasses.
I was thinking, when are you on that retreat?
This was actually held in our community.
I still have that shirt.
It's Ben's doghouse in the background. I was taking a photo. It looks so beautiful.
Sunata here in the front.
Oh, wow.
Sucharita.
And Diller.
And Diller.
Yeah.
Sarachita here in the back as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Samala. Yeah.
yeah,
Nagachita.
Yeah.
is that Subhuti?
And
It
Shirley
is.
Subhuti,
I
yes.
think he fell in the river on that one.
He did.
He was following me across the log.
He was
Twice.
I think he fell. He was so late because he had to come back here and change. That retreat was on the 3 Lakshanas.
Who was the woman next to Subhuti?
Shelley.
Shelley.
Oh, yeah. And the girl in purple?
It's
That's
Holly.
Holly.
Holly again.
So one more.
Aww.
There's
Is that
Karuna
the
Devi.
swim?
You know, having community meant we could have visitors, and Karuna Devi came and Daloj. We had a lot of visiting order members as well, like Sangha Devi. They could come, they had a place to come and stay when they came.
Yeah, so I'll just share a little bit about how I feel like it helped my spiritual practice that I haven't already said. I think it really helped create a Dharma container for me. Like I said, I was just had a troubled life up to that point, really. So it gave me this really um, substantial North Star, you know, of Dharma life that maybe I couldn't fully wholeheartedly live myself, but I could relate to others. And there was so much encouragement, and it really helped draw out my own commitment. So there were many times when I was like, did not want to be there. I had a lot of challenges around privacy. I was a bit of a wild child, so I didn't want to go and sit in the community night and have dinner together around the table, but I did anyways because I'd made that commitment. And like I said, you know, there's this dharmic phrase, I don't know if it comes from the Buddha, about you know, a wild horse that sort of eventually keeps running around and then it gradually is tamed. It was a bit like that, and the space of living in this community allowed for that wildness and come back. We love you, you know. So it was definitely something I hadn't experienced in my family of origin, and then my any other households that I had lived in were just really unstable, and so there was a stability to this, and a very well, the most meaningful thing I could do really would be to have that Dharma context to live in. I think, yeah, just, you know, like reflecting back, there were so many moments of going beyond myself, like just, you know, feeling selfish or feeling constrained, and then stretching beyond that just quite naturally. You know, it's because of the warmth and the well, the shared inspiration. It was, how can I not, in a way? You know, how can I not?
That's where your heart went.
That's where my heart went.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite a beautiful time, and yeah, it's lovely to revisit all of this actually. And I think we do create these moments in our friendships, in our you know, for those of you married and with children, and we create these conditions through our relationships, all of us do in different ways, and this was just a particular set of conditions that I'm really grateful I got to take part in. Yeah, so so those are my thoughts, and then I think Very Gita and or Joanne, maybe how did it benefit your spiritual practice?
Well, I wanted to particularly talk about ethics, actually. And I found that it's challenging, but it also was one of the benefits of living in community, because consequences of your actions are right there, and somebody's going to let you know. And I found that having someone really confront me with the consequences of my actions, and not saying, oh, well, we all do that, or whatever. It was, I really could look at the conditions that brought me to that. And I have to say that it was really, I was able to get rid of sort of a useless guilt and have really a true remorse and behavioral changes. So I found that particularly, and yeah, we had some really good conversations around it. And it brought me closer to people, because when I think when there's an ethical breach, it's like you tend to withdraw and be separate from people. But sort of talking about it and confessing it, really, I actually felt at one point it was like, you know, hang me, torture me, do whatever. But any external, I felt I was in a coursing in a stream where, and none of that would really bother me as long as I stayed in ethics. So it was quite powerful.
Does Barbara want to share before I share? Do you want to say anything here, Varda, or do you want to wait till the next question?
I think the consistency was a really big thing. And the agreement to sit together every morning and yeah, that made a big difference to me.
Yeah, for me too, it was like, you know, when you think about being able to, you know, the Buddha is so far away, like that ideal of enlightenment, it's like untouchable, I don't know what that is like. But I could see, you know, it was like a spiritual hierarchy within our community. You know, Viragita was close, well, we were the newbies, you know, but dedicated and committed. And then it was Viragita, you know, she was like the next step for me. It's like I could see myself in her. And then there was, you know, the order member Vidyavati, who I projected all kinds of stuff on, sorry. You know, good and bad probably, but it was still like pulled me towards. And so it really gave me a vision of where I was going, which I thought was really helpful to my practice. And then in the daily meditation, that was just immensely important to me. And at home, at least, I always practiced the metta bhavana. And for years, that was all I did at home. And when you think about practicing the metta and you have your community members in that practice every day, sometimes the fourth stage. But it's like every day you're you're having metta and in your heart with these women. And that really shifted. You know, I mean, I love these women. They're beautiful to me. And I think it's, you know, from that, well, they're beautiful women anyway, but it really, I think the daily metta bhavana practice really helped that. Yeah, having you guys in.
I'm glad you brought that out, yeah. Good, so now we'll move into our final question, and we'll go to the screen share, and Vidyavati will share with us the question and the quote.
So our fourth section is what were the challenges living in community? And the quote from Bhante is, living in community, you experience your self-will. In Buddhist terms, your avidya, your ignorance, your trishna, your craving, your own samskaras, subtle impressions of past actions. And we are brought up against ourselves, living together.
I think you're going to read out
The list.
yeah?
So in our Zoom meetings, we talked about what our challenges were. And you know, overall my memory of the women's communities was one of spiritual vitality and great fun and joy and spiritual friendship. But there were challenges, and I think it's more about how we dealt with them. But I'll just mention what those challenges were that we remembered. First of all, the issue of having privacy and personal space as compared to living communally. You know, how much personal space do you need? And how does it feel like when someone else is stepping into that? Secondly, were we going to be a women's only community where men didn't come inside? Or could we be an open community where maybe boyfriends could come and stay over? The third thing was just personality differences. You know, we were different people, different ages, different people. There were little things like noise levels, you know, doors closing or walls that were a bit thin and you could hear conversations going on. And finally, cleanliness, you know, who's left the dishes? You just had to be mindful of living with so many people, and some of these communities were 5 or 6 women, so you had to work through that. And I would say, we were talking about it, that the precepts really gave us the basis to work with these challenges. I think some of you might talk to that. I'll just say personally, before I pass on, that you were talking about, you know, maybe I was the Dhammacharini and looked up to, but I didn't feel that. I felt we were friends living together, And for me, it was a real refuge living with women, because the rest of, a lot of my life here was involved in only men contexts. The order was all men apart from me, and the centre was largely run by men, and there was a community here. And so for me, going back to the community, oh, it was just, it was great. So that's not so much a challenge of being in community, but it was an overall challenge of my life here. And yes, I suppose there was the challenge of being looked up to, and I always tried to look beyond that and just look for the friendships, because I felt I had so much to learn from these women as well, and I admired them, so many qualities.
Yeah, so, do you want to say anything?
Yes. When we brought this question up, I couldn't really think of any challenges other than, maybe a little bit of cleanliness, and I've completely thrown that out the window at this point in my life. But back then, for whatever reason, it was important to me. But I think that's really was it. I just really enjoyed the experience.
For me, my context, yeah, I lived with my lover, my boyfriend, like in the same room, that was fine. But then I was gonna room with Viryalila, we were gonna share a small room together. I was like, I don't know about this, that's really, she was studying all the time, and I had to be quiet, I felt that, and she didn't say that, but I was, it was just that intimacy I had only had with my lovers, not with my friends. And so it's different,
It was different. I went on a course at Aristana 2 summers ago for 6 weeks, and they had us sharing rooms. And I was like, no, I need my own room. I'm in my 50s now. And they were like, no, everyone's going to share a room. So I had a roommate, and it was interesting. Yeah, to revisit some of that, yeah.
And yet it does give this intimacy, sleeping together is quite an intimate experience, really.
Yeah, and Varada, I think, has some reflections here as well.
Yeah, I always found it challenging when we expanded or changed the makeup of the community. So it's, adding more personalities. Sometimes we added women that we knew, sometimes we added women that we didn't know at all. And animals. Sometimes the animals didn't get along. I had that little fluffy dog, Tashi, that you saw pictures of, and we moved in, Lene brought several cats. So Tashi got along with Viryagita's cat, but Tashi liked to torture Lene's cats. He would hide in the hallway, and when the cats went by, he would pounce on them. And she didn't like that very much. And so there was, sometimes there's immaturity and emotional reactivity, definitely on my own part, which created some of the challenges. There were sometimes different ideas about how, what community life was supposed to look like. It became clear we had to work out those questions. And most of us didn't have much experience at all in doing this. I had this really strong experience. This was from when a community in Montana, but it made me really realize. So one of the community members was just talking to me about the common areas and how, people had their stuff everywhere. Or clutter, that's what she called it. She called it clutter. And I said, and I looked around and I thought it looked pretty tidy to me. And I realized that to her, other people's stuff was clutter, and it bothered her. And it made me really realize that we looked at the same space completely differently. And the same was true of the kitchen. You know, the kitchen looked clean to one person, but it was still a big mess to another person. And so we had to we had to navigate that. And we had to kind of weave these different visions of community, these different levels of experience, these different relationships between people. Sometimes our needs were conflicting, our desires, projections, and these background assumptions that we all brought to the space. And sometimes I'm amazed that it worked as well as it did. But it did. And I think it was this sort of common structure of ethics, like Gita said. And yeah, just a common sense of practice, and that kindness was like the most important thing. And so my memories are overwhelmingly positive, so much so that when I moved to Montana, my first impetus was to form a community. And yeah, it was with women that I had never met before. Arya Drishti and Tara Vadri, and Arya Drishti came along floating on a log. At Nalanda West, she was floating in the river on a log, and I said, "Hey, you want to live in my community?" She said, "Yeah." Yeah, it's kind of amazing that it worked as well as it did.
I'll just
So I can see our catalog.
well, if I could just add in here, so when our community ended here in 1998 or so, the Devanti went back to the UK, and I got recruited by Varda and Arya Drishti, Marjorie at the time, to go to Montana. So I moved into their community in 2000, I think it was, and lived there for 2 years. And one of the challenges for me was, why are there so many dishes in the sink? There's so many dishes in the sink. These are not my dishes. And then when I came back here and I moved into my own apartment and I was on my own again, I had so many dirty dishes. I was like, wow. I was like, oh, it's like a lot of opportunity to work with the projections of our mind, yeah, and how we relate to others. And I had a lovely time out there. Lovely time.
It was lovely to live with you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another story, those bonds that were formed there. Yeah, yeah. So, so we're coming to the end now. That's the end of our 4 questions, yeah. And we thought we'd just create a little space here and a pause, which I'll turn over to Joanne.
Okay.
Yeah, for questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just wanted a little bit of time, I don't know what
Oh,
time.
no, I forgot
wait,
one
no,
thing.
Okay.
More slides.
Oh,
Should we do
gonna
the slides
finish up the
first?
slides.
Oh, we're gonna do that now?
Yeah. Well, you can be thinking about your questions.
Yeah, so we're gonna leave a little time for questions, just a few, or we actually have quite a lot of time.
About 15, 20 minutes.
Yes.
We go till 8:30 or 8:45?
8:30.
8:30? Yeah, we'll be done before 8:30, yeah. So we'll just look at a few more pictures here, and then there might be some familiar faces here.
Community was the place where we celebrated things, so if someone became a mitra, they came back to the community for cake and coffee. And we often went out to dinner for birthdays and whatever.
We're goofy, like we really like that.
And there's Sean and Rhoda.
We did plays here, so. Oh, we didn't mention this, but we also had a little right livelihood business with Amala involved too, where before the whole gluten-free movement, we were actually creating meatballs. We can, no one can remember how it like fell apart, but anyway, it was a good run for a little bit anyway.
This was some of the team at the facility where we were making the recipe and trying it out. We actually had a kitchen and we had a recipe and a business, and I think the kitchen kind of withdrew, or
Yeah.
their organisation felt that. And Joanne was very much part of it.
This is one of my favorite pictures of Aryaloka. I love her in this picture.
I think it's at Bread and Puppet up in Vermont, that's what it looks like, yeah. And then this is our face painting booth. We did face painting as a fundraiser for many, many years at Portsmouth Market Square Day. Mostly for women training for ordination to help support teachers coming. And then this is another little right livelihood.
When I first came out here, I set up a business called Window Artworks, which was painting showroom windows with promotional displays and signs. And Verigita joined me. And Varada was going to, I think, but maybe realised it wasn't really.
I think I did one window.
That was it, right? You're like, it's hard work.
And later on, Virilela
Yeah.
and even Dilocha, I think you came occasionally. Yeah.
And I did it for a little while after you left.
That's right, you kept it up.
These are some of the windows that we did.
Wow.
They were big.
There's still paint in my basement.
Wait,
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
wild.
Very creative.
That's an Audi coming out of the Porsche.
That's a lot of these coming out.
Okay, you're right.
Were they upset you put an Audi on the on a Porsche window?
Oh, jeez.
What?
Yeah.
No, they were a dealership. But they wanted Abraham Lincoln up there for
President's
whatever
Day.
it was, yeah.
President's Day.
So I had to go and get a picture of Abe Lincoln.
Oh, he's driving the car.
Yeah.
On the wrong side.
I
Oh, it's so bad.
Well, in addition to translating from, where they drive on the other side, she also drew these backwards. So all that lettering was
Right.
done in reverse. And there we are. So we just recreated the picture of the five of us when we got together for dinner last fall, and we've put Varda in there.
Thank you.
There with us in spirit. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any thoughts or reflections or questions, even on Zoom, that folks might have that we can just talk further
Yeah,
about?
I have a question. You told the story, Virgita, about Joanne thinking you were an intruder and throwing something at you while you were on this camping thing. And I'm just wondering whether that episode happened before or after the horse incident.
Oh, yes.
Good question. Well, she didn't know it was.
That's true. That's true.
I have a question about the right livelihood. It looked like you tried really hard to work together. Was that really consistent, or did it happen to come and go? And because I've observed in some communities that when people have to go off and find separate jobs, it often kind of weakens the community seriously, particularly if the schedules are different, or just their worlds start to pull in different directions. And it seems like it's a very hard but very significant thing to try to make that effort.
We were all working separately while we were trying to do this. So we were doing it the American way, where we're working like way too much, as we do here.
But you know what was interesting is, in my work, I would run into Aryaloka at her job. I would run into Virgita. So it was amazing how we were able to connect even through our jobs.
But the right livelihood itself, it took quite a bit of, we had a fundraise, raking leaves and everything, so it was quite difficult, but it still felt so good. Like, and we were so hopeful that it was gonna work too. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the community that I joined with Varda out in Montana was around the Two Goose Tiger project and restaurants. And when I think it was you, Varda, mentioning that you would be having a conversation at the kitchen table, we'd say goodnight, go to bed, but then the conversation would continue in the hallway. Well, that just happened around the business as well, and that was a challenge as well as something quite integrating too. So our work and our living together were one. Yeah, we did do a podcast a few years ago at the convention. Varda, Buddhapalada, myself, and Arya Drishti had an opportunity to talk about that time. It's lovely. You can find it on the Buddha Center. Different story.
Same thing.
Same, different story, yeah.
I can't really see on Zoom if there's anybody that is wanting to have any comments or if we're done.
Does what we've talked about appeal to you, or do you just think that was crazy? Do you think you could have lived in a community? Or?
I did live in a community for a couple of years, but it was a community slash center slash whatever. I mean, it was a different feel because it was quite big. It was Ayatara, and even then when I was there, and you were always having people come in. Some people walking in inappropriately and asking if they could have a potato because it was that high, something, and you sat down trying to, whatever it is that gives you the hungry horrors, But mostly it was like you had to also be ready for all the public activities. Plus trying to start the right line distances in Croydon. But a lot of what you said resonated. The difference seems to me that if you could pick it, you might have in your mind a kind of optimal size, maybe sort of like with a chapter. And in order to have enough stability, that seemed like it would have been, well, there were a lot of people moving in and out. But I really valued the experience. But then, sharing a room, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think do it on retreat, you might be able to possibly do it on.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was the men's community feeling here too, when they were living downstairs. I mean, people were coming in and out, in the center, so I'm sure that was helpful for the men.
Well, even when we lived in the big blue barn there, there was, often a flow of people in and out, sometimes desired and invited, but sometimes unexpected as well. So that could always provide some challenges. Yeah, when we doubled up in the men's as well, we shared rooms. And most of my time, I lived in the men's community here for about 9 years, and most of my time I shared a room with someone. I had several different roommates, and my own room a few times as well.
Ooh, you had your own even.
I did, yeah. It's exciting.
All right, so why don't we move in? We have like an ending and then another ending. So in terms of Singatara, yeah. So we're gonna do some rejoicing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm a little tired.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really grateful and thankful for, and I had no idea when I stepped in to live with these women, was that they would always be in my life for many, many years. I just didn't expect that. And so I really rejoice in the deep friendships that I've developed with these women, including Daloshna, who's not sitting up here, but example would be, I also became KMs with two of the women. And a KM is a Kalyana Mitra. And what Bhante, the description of that is that it's a friendship of profound, good, virtuous, and praiseworthy. And that's definitely what the friendship is that I've developed with my two KMs. And with Vijayavati, we've been friends ever since. And I love her. So the rejoicing is that they were so kind to me and helped me to gain confidence and to help me to spiritually go forward and to live with this confidence that I was able to live alone for all these years and just really focus on the practice and what the foundation was that they helped set for me.
Any other rejoicings? Final words before the finale? Yeah,
A little bit of a
yeah, please.
poem.
Oh, your poem, yes,
Well.
yes.
Just a quick, I'm just gonna read this one part. They are kind women. They are wise women. They are wild. They dance on the earth. They dance in the sky. And they dance around me, supporting me, believing in me, and inspiring.
Thank you for sharing that, Viragita, yeah. So this is kind of a surprise finale that we
Very
just added.
surprise.
We just added before this evening started, and we're gonna stand up. You all can stand up too if you want, but we're gonna give you a little finale song.
Part of
So we've been sitting for a while, so move around a little bit. Oh, you're gonna do that? Yeah. Okay, come over here. So if you could just give us a little room, because we're gonna perform a song for you. I just want to give everyone a chance to stand up. Oh, here you go. Do you want to stand together? There you go.
And I love that I can do this with these women behind me because I am like so shy and like embarrassed half my life. So like I'm only doing this because of them.
Yeah.
So and also what we actually created this, we wrote this song for ourselves. I don't know where we performed it, but anyway. You ready, ladies?
We're ready.
It's sung to the melody of Dinah, Won't You Blow Your Horn? Is that the name of the song?
Yeah.
All right. So Joanne came to the States for adventure, not knowing where her life would end. Moved up to New Hampshire, looking for some spiritual friends. Reflecting on impermanence, still wondering where my life would go. Tired of all the dukkha nonsense, now I'm living at the women's abode. Vijayavati came to the States as on a vacation, fell in love with the Sangha here, said goodbye to her old friends. Now she's living with a whole bunch more. The center needed a director. I stepped into the role. Now it's the women she wants to be with, living in the women's abode. Gita. Marilyn living all alone with a 10-year-old, practicing the Dharma on her own. Came across the guys in the dome and found her spiritual home. I like this line. Men couldn't fulfill all my needs. Needed something more. Formed a woman's sangha. Now she's living in the woman's abode. Woo! Toaster's been left on all day. Coffee pot still brewing away. Who's forgotten we need not say.
Mindful of the women's abode. Don't you throw that food away. Marilyn will eat it by next week. Wait till it turns a greenish gray. Eating at the women's abode. Woo!
When did you write that?
You don't remember.
A long time ago, not this week.
Oh, no,
No,
it was
no,
like
no,
back
no,
in the, I left some out, it was really, yeah, it was a lot. I didn't wanna like, put them through all that. Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.